Dear friends, welcome to the closing press conference. The finishing post is in sight. Just before I introduce somebody who you already know to make a few remarks and take your questions, I simply just wanted to say thank you. When we met on Monday, we said that you in the media are our partners in animating and explaining the whole development challenge of Africa, and we thank you enormously for the work that you've done in that respect. That's why at the beginning of this week we organized some media training on the issue of reporting climate change. And we've had a busy media center. You've been busy as bees. You've always been humming. Sometimes you've been buzzing. And when I make lines like that, I really wouldn't want to be an interpreter. So, President, over to you, please, for some remarks and questions.
Well, let me first and foremost express to you, the media, the great appreciation of the African Development Bank for your massive participation in these annual meetings. The media is actually the light to our communities, the light to our cities. And you're the one who project exactly what we need to hear. Sometimes not very pretty, sometimes what you want to hear, but you've got to do it. But you are also the media that's very important to communicate the very important things that are going on in Africa, because you provide the light to Africa. Actually, when I look at the Light Up and Power Africa, I want the media to help us light up Africa with great news about what's happening with regard to that. This has been a phenomenal annual meeting. So basically, everybody was here. And why were they here? They were here because the issues that we have selected for the annual meetings are very, very important issues for Africa, to energy and climate change. And again, I won't go through it, but you have already had it, that without electricity, without energy, African economies are going nowhere. And of course, we have to go somewhere. We have to grow. We have to be inclusive. We have to be competitive. And without energy, that's not going to happen. We heard through these meetings that in trying to solve that particular problem, there is a differentiated approach. We need grid systems. We need off-grid systems. We need mini-grid systems. We also heard that it's important for us to unlock our renewable energy potential, which is immense. As I've always said, we will use we tap every single thing we can get from the moon, from the sun, until the sun becomes the moon. We will unlock together with our partners the renewable energy potential for Africa. What else did we hear? You heard the story of Kevin Doe out of Sierra Leone. His passion, his commitment. It gives you a sense of future. We were together with Ashish Thakkar. Many of you know him as a great entrepreneur, in a fire chat with Africa's youth all over the media. We are saying with the launch of the Jobs for Africa's Youth initiative by the bank has created tremendous amount of excitement among our young people. We also had a lot of things about women. We launched the African Affirmative Finance Action for Women. Just this morning, I was with all the ministers of finance, and we were talking about action, action, and action. I am very impatient for results, and I think Africa should demand impatience as well for results. And so what we talked about is immediately we will move between now and October to how to actually roll some of these things out. So I can go on and on. You've covered so many of these stories. I just want to say that I'm very grateful to you all for all of what you have covered, and I know you have questions that you want to ask, but let me just say, for this moment before I sit down, I'm grateful to you. Thank you so very much for covering us, and thank you also for having the same passion that we have for Africa. Thank you, and the floor is open for questions.
Thank you. If you'd like to raise a hand, Olivia has microphones. Please introduce yourselves and make your questions. We'll take several rounds. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much. A very good afternoon, Mr. President. My name is Stuart Lisulo from the Post newspapers here. What response the African Development Bank had specifically to that impassioned appeal for more equity into CEC Africa? Thank you.
Thank you. A second question, please.
I'm Stephen Nkoma from CBC Television, Zambia. My question dwells much on the issue to do with all the issues that you've talked about during these annual meetings, are we going to see something that is just going to end from these discussions? And what have you put in place to make sure that what you have discussed comes to pass than just from discussing then you fold your arms as African Development Bank?
I'm going to take one more from this area, then President will answer, and then I'll look to the right.
Ok. Monsieur Fall, de l'économiste Casablanca, Maroc. Tout à l'heure, Monsieur le Président, vous avez parlé avec le ministre marocain, Monsieur Mezouar, par rapport à la COP22. Vous êtes très attendu au niveau de cette COP. Quel sera l'apport concret de la BAD en termes de propositions? Et est-ce que ce sera juste le rôle de financeur, de mobilisateur des finances, ou là de gestion réelle des finances par rapport à ça? Merci.
Thank you very much. I think the issue that was raised about equity, you said to which organization? Huh? They what? I didn't.
Stand up.
Post newspapers. I didn't get it. Post newspapers. C. Ah, okay, all right, okay. Well, you know, for us, in terms of what we do, you know, we have a whole range of instruments that we use to support things, right? We support via equity, we support via loans, we support via guarantees. So regardless of the entity, you know, if the issue meets the developmental direction that African Development Bank wants to go, you know, we will look at what's appropriate given what the needs are. It has to fit in our strategy, and that's how we have a whole series of instruments that we can deploy for that. For the annual meetings, what's the next step? In fact, I was just at the meeting with the Ségolène Royal, the chairperson of COP21, and also with the incoming chairperson. I'll come back to your question of COP22. What did we discuss? We discussed action, action, and action. Exactly what is going to happen in COP22 is not going to be left to chance. And we discussed quite a lot about climate change, about how much we are going to mobilize in terms of climate finance, and also how we have to hold the global community accountable in terms of resources that is supposed to support Africa post-COP21 in Paris. We also had discussions just this morning, I was telling you, with the ministers of finance on the affirmative finance for action for women in Africa. This is the facility that we are setting up, which is going to help us mobilize close to $3 billion for women all across Africa. What are we doing? Just this morning, we reached a decision that the African Development Bank will convene a meeting of all the central bank governors and all the ministers of finance and the microfinance institutions in Africa, from all across Africa, to discuss three things. First, the affirmative finance action for a given country. In other words, create a group of practice in each of the countries. Second one is that the countries themselves have to put in policies that will encourage lending more to women. And third is that we need a way in which we will de-risk the financial value chains to be able to lend more to women. And that was an action that we actually took, just to tell you how quickly we are moving into it. On the issue of energy, we decided that, you know, now that we have our strategy rolled out, a number of things have to be done. First, for us as a bank, from next week, we will advertise our position to have a vice president for power, energy, and green growth for the bank. As I mentioned to you when we started, we are actually structuring ourselves fit for purpose to deliver, right? What's important is to execute, but we have to structure ourselves to do that. The African Development Bank has now established what is called a vice presidency for power, energy, and green growth. We're going to recruit top-notch staff into that place in the next couple of months very quickly so we can roll out things. Now, for us in energy, our approach to energy, honestly, believe me, is going to be not about talk, but got to be on execution. And so within the next couple of months, you will see a lot of projects that we are going to do. Africa 50, I don't know if it's here, but yeah, okay. The CEO of Africa 50 is here, and you may want to talk to him, to discuss with him. I asked him pointedly, I'm the chairman of the board of Africa 50, and he's a fantastic guy. We just hired him. So yesterday in a fire chat with Africa's Youth, I asked him, you know, how many energy projects are we going to roll out from Africa 50 next year? You told me what?
10 to 15.
Okay.
First year.
Yes, 10 to 15. That's the sense of urgency that you see with how we are moving. Et en ce qui concerne le COP22, je viens d'avoir les réunions avec le ministre des Affaires étrangères du Maroc. Et tout d'abord, je voudrais féliciter le roi, Sa Majesté de Maroc, pour avoir pris la responsabilité de faire la COP22 pour l'Afrique. COP22. COP22, c'est notre COP. C'est COP de l'Afrique. Et quand il y avait mentionné, je crois que les choses qu'il faut faire pour le COP22, c'est que le COP22 doit être une COP pour action sur les choses très importantes pour l'Afrique. Et je pense qu'il y a les choses qui sont très importantes. On a engagé ce matin avec Mme Ségolène Royal, qui est maintenant le chairperson de COP21, sur différentes choses. Tout d'abord, sur l'énergie renouvelable. Il y a une initiative sur l'énergie renouvelable qui a été développée et lancée en Paris pendant COP21. Il y aura le financement pour ça les Allemands, les Canadiens et aussi le gouvernement français. Et ça, c'est à part. Mais il y avait aussi l'initiative qui va soutenir l'énergie renouvelable de la part de l'Union européenne. Il y a une montant qu'ils sont discutés de 3 milliards d'euros et tout cela. Mais c'est la Banque africaine de développement qui est au sein de choses pour faire la coordination nécessaire pour qu'on puisse avoir les projets concrets, bancables, pour lesquels il faut avoir les financements.
Thank you. Let's come over here, please.
Good afternoon, Mr. President. My name is Kalonde from Zambia Daily Mail. In your official opening remarks, you said Africa should avoid getting into debt. How deep is this crisis, and what role would the ADB play in mitigating the crisis? Thank you.
Behind you.
Thank you very much. My name is Emmanuel K. Dugbevi. I work for Ghana Business News. You're talking about looking for and using various energy mix for developing power to power the continent. And then it means you're looking at anything that is fungible, including coal. And coal came up in most of the discussions during some of the sessions. I want to know what the position of the bank is on the use of coal, taking into account the fact that coal plants around the developed countries are all shutting down. Thank you.
One more in this area. Olivia? One in the front. Sorry. Let's do that. Yeah, fine.
Good afternoon, Mr. President. My name is Jeff Kapembwa. I write for the Southern Times of Namibia, and I also write for the Zambia Informer. It's a blog. I just wanted to get your commitment towards assisting Africa integrate. Of late, there's been a lot of talk from scholars that there's no political will. So what is your role as Africa Development Bank in seeing Africa integrate at the time of 2025? Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think first let me say, with regard to the issue of financial crisis, Africa is not in a crisis. Let me explain. If you take a look at Europe today, the growth rate in Europe, GDP growth rate in Europe, was 1.9%. It's gone down to 1.7%, and nobody says Europe is in a crisis. You take a look at the global economic environment. IMF moved down the global GDP growth rates down from the earlier projection should be over 2%. And nobody is saying that the world is in a crisis. So the world crisis shouldn't be used for Africa. If you are swimming, and you're a very good swimmer, you keep your head underwater, above water, and you can swim well. In a situation where you have a global economic headwinds, Africa growing about 4% this year, and projected to grow even faster in 2017. That means that Africa's head is above the water in a situation where, a very turbulent, a difficult situation of economic headwinds facing the world. Africa is not unique. In fact, African economies are quite resilient. Now, when you face shocks The issue is not the shock. The issue is your ability to be able to be resilient to recover from the shock. And here are the things that I think are very important for Africa to continue to remain resilient. First, African economies must rapidly diversify. That's very critical. They must diversify in terms of their export mix. They must also diversify in terms of the ways in which they, instead of exporting raw materials, they must actually export value-added products. Secondly is with regard to the regional markets. Countries that participate more in regional markets are less susceptible to the volatility of global commodity prices. So it's an opportunity to be able to do that. And third is that we as multilateral development banks, we are working also to provide counter-cyclical financial support for them to be able to remain buoyant even in difficult times. But don't forget, prices don't stay low forever. If you look at the price of oil today, it's probably about $51. That's probably the best it has been in quite a long time. So I don't think Africa should be boxed into a corner. It's not different from any part of the world. And as demand continues to grow, in Europe, and you had a situation that happened in Canada because of the reduction in supply and so on, it makes a lot of opportunities for African countries. So I think that the story for Africa will continue to be a resilient Africa. With regard to the issue of coal, the issue is, let's understand the energy mix in the world today. OECD countries' energy mix, 46% of it is coal. And so many European countries, and some they're actually not even shutting down, actually. They're actually increasing the level of development of coal. So I don't think that Africa should be put in a situation where it's been admonished for what it's not even doing, right? That's my personal view. When it comes to this, I think emotion should not be used. Data is what matters. What was agreed in COP21 was that there will be a move towards reduction in emissions, CO2 emissions. And for us at the African Development Bank, the New Deal on Energy for Africa that we have presented is one in which is going to allow Africa to grow its energy base, but decoupling that growth, which means Africa grows while reducing actually its own CO2 emissions. That's a fantastic thing, which means we are decoupling growth from CO2 emissions. As a bank, we also have to recognize that technologies are also changing around the world. I went to Korea and also to Japan. And I was surprised when I got into this. I had my own mindset about what coal was. And when I got there in Japan and Korea, we went into this particular power station, which is called J-Power in Japan. And the other one was Korea Power Station. They have a coal-fired plant that uses the ultra supercritical technology. And it reduces the nitrous oxide by about 98.5%, particles by about almost 99.9%, and also sulfur oxide by about 98.5%. You will think you are in a five-star hotel. Technology is moving very rapidly. What we want to say for Africa is this. Africa Development Bank, we will provide a lot of financing for all countries to do renewable energy at scale. It's not something we are thinking of doing, it's something we are doing already. We supported the Lake Turkana, which is Africa's largest wind farm in Kenya. We supported the Noah complex in Morocco, which is the largest concentrated solar farm in the world. We're supporting a lot of geothermal also in East Africa and a lot of solar. We are committed to using grid, mini-grid, and off-grid systems, but also allowing African countries that have non-renewable energy sources, including fossil fuels, to use it. But use it in a way that's environmentally sound, with technology that allows you to reduce the emission. That is what is very, very important. I may like to also say that if you have two people, and one is very fat, and the other person is thin, the fat person needs to lose weight fast. The thin person needs to gain a little bit of weight. to have a little bit of chance to even have a life.
Thank you.
And the other one about political will on regional integration. I think that the tripartite free trade area that you find in COMESA, East African Community, and SADC is a fantastic development. We need to do more. Our position within the bank is that to really integrate Africa goes beyond just even the political will that you're talking about. You can have all the political will in the world. If there is no rail that links one country to the other, if there is no transnational highways that link them, if the tariff and non-tariff barriers are not coming down, or the airwaves are completely closed from each other, you can have all the political will in the world, it won't happen. That is why the African Development Bank, regional integration is very important for us. And the three areas we are investing in is first and foremost on regional infrastructure. If it's on energy, regional infrastructure, connectivity, lines of transmission, linking Mozambique down to Zambia to be able to have, to Malawi, Zambia, to be able to have access to electricity. In the Mano River area, linking Liberia, Guinea, Liberia, and Sierra Leone together. Linking Senegal down to Mali. Those kind of connectivity lines are very, very important. And so we are investing in infrastructure. Second thing is that we just released what is called the Visa Open Index in Africa. What did we find? Africa is still closed. You can't travel easily in many African countries. And so we are arguing together with African Union, we have to bring all these walls separating us in Africa down. What are we doing with the walls? We don't need them. Africa needs a bigger size market, and we need to make all these walls that separate us to go down. And finally is that a more resilient Africa requires a highly integrated financial market from Casablanca all the way to Johannesburg, to Nairobi. We have to integrate our capital markets and Johannesburg to make sure that we can actually have the deep resources to happen. Let me just tell you, if you look at Africa to Africa investment, over 10 years ago was about $10 billion. Today, it's moved to $50 billion, which means Africans believe in Africa. And we as African Development Bank believe in Africa, but we want an Africa where it is easier to travel, where labor mobility can happen, where financial markets can be integrated. And that's what we are working on.
Colleagues, we have 3 minutes left. I can take one question. Sorry, Olivier. Only one, and let's take it from the far end, because we've come this way. You choose one, Olivier.
A woman.
A lady.
Yes,
Very
a woman.
good.
I agree, a woman, yes.
Thank you. The last question. Thank you.
It's on.
But is the man answering his own question to him?
Good afternoon, Your Excellence, President. My name's Nosiku Muyawa from Zanis. My concern is on the rural development. I would like to find out if in your implementation program, you have considered projects that could quickly benefit the rural areas in Africa, because there is this negative perception of African meetings benefiting only the working class. That's my question, Mr. President.
Okay. And it didn't include his own, right? So, no. I can't overrule my staff.
It's okay.
On the issue of the rural development, there is no doubt that there is a divide in terms of the growth process. Over 70% of our labor force are in the rural areas, and they depend on agriculture for a living. So in our agricultural strategy that we've developed, we are focusing on how to create what we call, new zones of economic prosperity. And what I mean by that is that taking agriculture as a business that works for smallholder farmers, that allows them to have markets, that allows them to be able to have access to finance, that allows them to have access to infrastructure, to link them to markets. We discussed this agricultural strategy at these annual meetings with a lot of civil society, private sector, and everybody else. And what I said to them is that we must not be afraid of wealth. We should always be afraid of poverty. And I don't want Africa to become a museum of poverty. Agriculture is a money-making business because everybody eats food. We want our farmers to take it as a business. African farmers are not different from any farmers in the world. The only reason is they don't have the right technology. They don't have access to finance. Women don't have access to land to be able to do a lot of it. They also don't have access to good markets and so on. So we want to remove the constraints around our smallholder farmers, especially women, and allow them to be able to produce well and also to be able to sell. And of course, to get young people into agriculture. In the rural area, we discussed quite a lot linking back to energy. At the end of the day, we are going to be faster in many rural areas to connect them to off-grid systems. And I think everybody agreed on that. In our new deal on energy for Africa, we are going to work to connect 75 million people to the off-grid system. A lot of those are going to be in the rural area so that nobody gets left behind. And finally, it's on rural finance. I think in the affirmative finance action for women that we announced at this annual meeting, we are going to look at how to make microfinance facilities available for women farmers, because I really think that if we get that right, then we'll actually have gotten many things right, both in terms of inclusiveness, but also for children nutrition, which I think is also very important.
Thank you, President. Colleagues, President has to run. We remain at your disposal. Thank you very, very much indeed.